Welcome to Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin and Russian History with Dr. Brovkin. Today I'd like to talk about new trends in Russian politics. As the war in Ukraine is going on, there slowly are beginning to appear some new trends in Russian politics, and this is extremely important for the fate of Russia or international relations or peace in the world. So what are these new trends? I have identified three points. One is polarization of Russian public opinion, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Second, rise of patriotic nationalist opposition to President Putin. And three, radicalization of anti-Western patriotic opposition. So here are the beginnings, the polarization of Russian society. Now, this is not exactly new. This has been going on for at least a year since the beginning of the special military operation. The polarization basically means that the middle is slowly disintegrating, and that the extremes on both sides, as opposed to those who are opposed to war and those who are for the war, are taking more extreme positions. Now, for 20 years, Russian politics has been characterized by what I call Putin consensus. Putin was a kind of an epitome of a unity that suited all. On the one hand, during most of his time in office, he was an ardent Westernizer. He was promoting Western investment and building foreign factories and direct investment, and all kinds of foreign companies were doing business in Russia. He was trying to involve the big oil of the West and British Petroleum and Exxon and others were there. Now, all of that drastically changed with the beginning of the military operation in Ukraine. All of the Western companies left. The sanctions were imposed, unheard of, unprecedented. SWIFT was taken off Russian banks, etc., etc., etc. The result of that, of course, is that the pro-Western part of society, which Putin was a part of, is now out. And that means that the segment of Russian society that welcomed that kind of policy is now not in favor. In other words, Putin changed his policies, and those segments of society that supported those, they are now in a de facto opposition. This is big part of intelligentsia, the performing arts leaders, Pugacheva, Galkin, many others, who left the country. About 200,000 people left. Also those who opposed the draft left. So this is the people who are in opposition to the special military operation in various degrees. Some of them take the extreme position in that they wish the Ukraine wins, and this is Navalny and others, darlings of the West. That actually discredits them in the eyes of patriotic Russians, and this is why there is this polarization. One side, as I mentioned, do favor Ukrainian win because they hate Putin regime so much. In terms of numbers, these are hard to say, but these are a minority, and these are mostly in the big cities, mostly connected with big business, those who kept their money and their children and their bank accounts and their yachts and palaces in Western Europe. Now, the second point is rise of patriotic opposition, and that is really new. And this is something that's been kind of going on most actively in the last several months. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the leaders of the patriotic opposition is Mr. Strelkov, who was a FSB officer in the Donetsk People's Republic. And as time went on, he voiced more and more criticism of Putin and the way the war was conducted from the positions of patriotic opposition. Recently, he has created a so-called a club of angry patriots. And I want to point out this is a very new and very interesting a development, because you have now a real opposition to Putin from the patriotic positions. In other words, not good enough. The war is conducted poorly. So let me run down exactly some of the points that they repeat in their videos and speeches and so forth. The historical part of the opposition begins with 2014. The angry patriots are saying that Putin should be responsible for his own mistakes and for his own actions. It was he who promoted the Minsk Accords, and now he admits and recognizes that he was duped by Western leaders and by the Ukrainians, who used this time to arm themselves and then attack Donbass. The question that the angry patriots are asking: how come Putin is not admitting, at least, that this was a mistake and it's a failure, and a failure that costs 1 year of very, very tough fight in Donbass, and thousands of Russian soldiers are dying because of what? Because Putin failed to act in 2014, when all of Donbass could have been liberated easily, so the argument goes. And therefore they directly blame President Putin on this failure. Second criticism goes about how the special military operation is conducted. Strelkov keeps repeating it was wrong from the very beginning. Where was Russian intelligence that failed to identify the strength of the Ukrainian army? Why didn't they take enough measures to build up a military force of the Russian Federation that could handle the Ukrainian army? Now, obviously they didn't. And then he keeps saying, who is responsible for the withdrawal from Kiev, from the withdrawal and runaway of Russian troops under Kharkov in August last year? And then who is responsible for the failure to defend Kherson and the withdrawal from there? So there are 3 big withdrawals, retreats of the Russian army, with casualties and ammunition lost and tanks lost. Who is responsible? Namely the person, the general, asks Mr. Strelkov, and there's no answer. And this is why they're very, very angry that there is no system of responsibility and evaluation. Who did what that was right, and who did what with what was wrong or a failure. So this is now also they continue to say, what are the war aims? This is one of their main points, is that Putin has not identified, are we going to take Odessa? Are we going to take Kharkov? Where is going to be the borderline between Ukraine and Russia after the war? So these are the Strelkov people. Now, the radicalization goes further. And that is something exactly new. This is something that didn't exist 4 months ago. So radicalization, not just of Strelkov, but of the public opinion. So when I look at the Russian news on a daily basis and read their newspapers and video shows and discussions and so forth, what I find amazing is the comments of some of the professional commentators, such as Mr. Solovyov and his show that goes every day, but also, and most interesting, the comments of common people who in social media write their responses to news items that appear on a daily basis. Now, obviously, this is not a scientific survey of public opinion, but these are things that appear that had never ever appeared before, and this is what I find most interesting. So here, for example, a news that the British have supplied new missiles, Storm Shadow or something like this, that hit Lugansk just a couple of days ago. And there were a lot of people who died, and this was a city that hadn't been shelled for months. So what are the comments that people write? People say, hey, the British provided the missile that hit Lugansk. Why don't we hit the British? Now, then there's a news item that the Leopard tanks that Germany provided, and that they're now in Ukraine and they're fighting on Ukrainian soil against Russian tanks. So what is the comments? The comments that people say, how come we're not hitting Berlin? And some of them are saying, now we should go and take Berlin the second time around and teach Germans a lesson how to send their tanks to Russian territory. So means that the public opinion, and these are common people. I'm saying it's not scientific, public opinion, but these are the comments that had never appeared before. So there's an anger that is growing on in Russia against the people who supply, and the countries that supply military ammunition that kills Russian soldiers. Most anger is directed against the Poles, the Germans, and the Americans. And these are the ones that provide most military aid, and the British, of course, to Ukraine, and they are rearming and arming Ukraine in this so-called offensive that they're going to begin or have begun. So there are things that are being proposed that are now a part of the that are not only common people writing in their commentaries, but also part of that radical, angry response can be found in official representatives, such as former President Medvedev, who is the deputy chairman of the Security Council. His comments are, outrageous in a sense that had never been said anything like this before. When a missile hit Moscow and exploded over the Kremlin, Medvedev said that this is an attempted assassination of President Putin. Why don't we assassinate Zelensky? Where are the promises to hit the decision makers' centers? How come we have not been bombing Lvov and Kiev and other places? In other words, there's amazing radicalization, even not just by common people, but the official representatives of the Russian state. And finally, there are two more very important individuals that the Western media pays a lot of attention to, and that is Prigozhin, the Wagner military company, private military company, and Kadyrov, who is the president of Chechen Republic. Just yesterday, Kadyrov mounted the tank and kind of played a role as if he is riding on to Kiev. And there's more and more public sentiment that the way the Ukrainians are conducting themselves excludes any possibility of any deal and any consensus, because they will take this as a break and keep on arming and then join NATO and then attack Russia. Again, the result of that kind of a thinking and attitudes is that consensus is growing that there should be only final total Russian military victory with the taking of Kiev. And some of them add, and then maybe we should go to Warsaw, because Poland is doing everything to hurt Russia. Now, obviously, these are not official policies, and in this context, President Putin comes across as very, very modest, as very, very, in fact, he's accused all the time that the Western powers are raising the stakes, supplying more arms and tanks and missiles, and now they're talking about providing aircraft, and Putin is doing nothing. And there's a kind of a anger growing on. Why is he not doing nothing? Why are the generals sitting around and only Wagner company is fighting? And finally, about Wagner. Prigozhin has been very articulate in his criticism of Russian generals. He stays away of criticizing Putin, unlike Strelkov, but he's been criticizing Shoigu, defense minister, and the general staff. In general, he's been saying all kinds of things, that they're incompetent, that they're corrupt, that they're stupid, that they don't know how to fight, that they're not giving him enough ammunition. But in fact, if you look at the military affairs of the last 6 months, maybe longer, since August, it has been only the Wagner company that's been doing the fighting and has been taking territory and has just completed taking of Bakhmut. So Prigozhin has a growing number of supporters. Now, next year there's going to be elections in Russia, and that means that the angry patriots and a part of the establishment like Medvedev, and people who support Prigozhin, and many governors who support him, will become a political force that will be, I think, quite important. Putin still has 85% support. He still lives on credit and on trust that he would lead the country to victory. But now, as I say, there's new trends and new radical anti-Western, critical of Putin opinion that is rising in Russia, and it may have very serious consequences for the future. Thank you. Subscribe, please.